Okay, so let's dive into the fascinating history of how we teach and learn languages. It's a story that's absolutely filled with competing philosophies, some pretty strange experiments, and this century-long search for one single, perfect way to teach.
You know, that wasn't random at all. Turns out you and your friend were basically unwitting participants in this epic century-long quest. See, educators have been desperately searching for a single super method for language learning, the one that works for absolutely everyone. And believe me, that search has led to some very strange places.
But hang on, before we can really get into this history, we kind of need to understand the rules of the game. To make any sense of this whole quest, we first have to get really clear on the difference between an approach, a method, and a technique. They might sound like the same thing, but they are worlds apart.
So first, at the very top of the pyramid, we have the approach. This is the big, overarching philosophy. It's a set of core beliefs about what language even is and how our brains are wired to learn it. Is language a set of grammar rules to memorize, or is it a tool for communication? Your answer to that question, that's your approach. Okay, so flowing down from that big picture approach is the method. If the approach is the philosophy, think of the method as the detailed blueprint for building the house. It's a specific, pre-packaged plan that tells teachers and students exactly what to do, what materials to use. It even defines their roles in the classroom. It's the recipe book. And finally, we get down to the most granular level, the technique. These are the individual bricks and nails. They're the specific things you actually do in the classroom. The grammar drills, the conversation games, the role-playing. Each one is just a single tool you use to execute the blueprint of the method. So the key thing to remember here is this hierarchy. A broad philosophy, the approach, leads to a specific classroom plan, the method, which is then carried out using all these individual techniques. Got it? Great. Now our story can really begin. Our story starts in an era of really strict rules and rigid structure. This was a time when learning a language was seen as this heavy intellectual exercise, and getting every single tiny detail perfect, well, that was the ultimate goal. The first major player on the scene was the grammar translation method. And yeah, the name pretty much gives it away. It came from the world of teaching dead languages, like Latin and Greek. The goal wasn't to actually speak French or German, no way. It was to dissect it like a scientist. Just imagine classrooms filled with the silent scratching of pens, translating these bizarre, disconnected sentences like "the farmer's pen is in the garden" back and forth. And all of the instruction was happening in your native language.
But then, a totally radical new idea took hold, and it's captured perfectly in this quote. The focus shifted from intellectual analysis to pure unthinking habit. And this shift? It was kicked off by a massive global crisis. And that crisis was World War II. The U.S. military had a huge problem. They needed soldiers, spies, and diplomats who could actually speak foreign languages, and they needed them like yesterday. So out of this urgency came the Army method, which later became the audiolingual method. The philosophy was super simple. Treat language like a set of mechanical habits. You learn by listening to a phrase and repeating it over and over and over again until the correct response is totally automatic. Just like a soldier assembling a rifle blindfolded. This slide really brings home the philosophical battle that was raging. It was a complete 180. In one corner, you have the slow, scholarly analysis of grammar translation, and in the other, you have the fast-paced, high-pressure world of the audiolingual method. The teacher literally went from a tweety professor to a drill sergeant. And look at that row for errors. In one, a mistake is a learning opportunity. You correct it on paper. In the other, it's a dangerous flaw, a bad habit that has to be stamped out at all costs. But the reign of the drill sergeant couldn't last forever. People started asking, is this really how humans learn? Are we just machines to be programmed? In reaction to the rigid, mechanical world of audiolingualism, the pendulum swung hard in the other direction. It kicked off what you could call a human revolution. The focus shifted away from external habits and turned inward, to the mind, the emotions, and the psychology of the learner. This era just unleashed a wave of radical, almost bizarre designer methods. One of the most famous was the silent way. Just try to imagine this. The teacher says almost nothing. Instead, they use tools like these colored rods and sound charts to guide students. The core belief was totally out there. Students learn best when they're forced to discover the rules for themselves, not when they're just spoon-fed explanations. It was all about learning through problem solving. And then things got even stranger.
Enter Suggestipedia, which aimed to break down students' psychological barriers to learning. How? By creating a deeply relaxing, almost hypnotic environment. Students would sit in these super comfy chairs with dim lighting and Baroque music playing while the teacher read long dialogues. The whole goal was to make them more suggestible so they could absorb huge amounts of vocabulary. Then there was Total Physical Response, or TPR. This one is built on a really beautiful, simple idea. You should learn a second language the exact same way a baby learns their first. It starts with understanding, not talking. So just like you see here, the teacher gives commands, stand up, walk to the door, and students just do it. They respond with physical movement, no words needed. You're connecting language directly to action, literally learning by doing.
So, okay, we've gone from rigid grammar rules and army drills all the way to silent classrooms and hypnotic music. With all these wildly different ideas, and each one claiming to be the answer, the central question of our whole quest became totally unavoidable.
After decades of all this research and debate, which one is it? Which is the single best way to learn a language? Is there one method to rule them all?
And the answer, after this entire century-long quest, was that the quest itself was flawed. Researchers and teachers came to a really startling, but ultimately liberating conclusion. As this slide says, the perfect method is a myth. It just doesn't exist.
So the issue wasn't with any single method, but with the very idea of a universal method with a capital M. As you can see here, these prepackaged solutions were often just commercial fads, really, driven more by publishers than by actual science. They were culturally biased, usually developed in the US or the UK, and then shipped out as if a classroom in Tokyo has the exact same needs as one in Buenos Aires. The big realization was that context is everything. The quest for a single super method wasn't just a failure, it was the wrong question to be asking in the first place.
So if the quest for the one perfect method was a bust, where did that leave language teaching? What rose from the ashes of these so-called method wars?
And the hero that emerges from this story isn't some rigid method, but a flexible approach called principled eclecticism. The core idea here is that the teacher is the expert, not a textbook. A great teacher doesn't blindly follow a single recipe. No, they're like a master chef who understands the principles of cooking and can pull techniques from Italian, French, or Japanese cuisine to create the perfect meal for their specific guests on that specific night.
And this just brilliantly illustrates why the modern approach is so powerful. An eclectic teacher is like a skilled artisan with a huge and varied toolkit. They can pull out a grammar drill when it's needed, use a fun communicative game to build fluency, and maybe even borrow a technique from Total Physical Response for vocabulary. They are flexible, engaging, and ultimately way more effective.
And this is where our whole history lesson becomes intensely personal for you. Understanding this journey isn't just trivia. It's a license to take control of your own learning. There is no magic bullet. So you get to be your own method designer. You can pick and choose. Do you learn vocabulary best with flashcards or by physically labeling things in your house? Do you need strict grammar rules or do you thrive in free-flowing conversation? The modern era of language learning empowers you to build your own toolkit. So the final question really isn't just what's in your toolkit, it's what are you going to build with it?